Hello everyone, Samuel Yang here, and I'm doing my first ever journaling piece, and I'm covering the story Jordan Randall versus Busboys and Poets. It's a very interesting story, so see you guys in the story. Enjoy.
This should not be an issue of partisanship. It should be an issue of those with integrity and those without. And it all changed as soon as I sent out my headshot. Out of his own mouth, he said, there is a name for a black person who does the bidding for the oppressor. What type of activist threatens to sue someone because a video came out about them? And I was like, yeah, this happened because of my race. And he was like, no, it didn't. And if you say that it was about your race, we will sue you. That is insane. They literally just used the Baltimore Sun to lie to the public. And what did the Baltimore Sun do? Nothing. They sold the entire black community down the river to support, and I'm just gonna say it, to do PR work for a major Democratic donor. And what was his response? None of this is my fault. 1,200 people are looking for answers. The black community is looking for answers.
First question I'm going to ask is, how did your whole situation between you and Busboys and Poets began?
Okay. So, well, this started with the writing my book. I wrote the book Pink Face. The kid gets in his head that the world's no longer built for like straight white guys anymore. So to stand out on his college applications, he pretends to transition to a woman. It's a satire of the things I experienced growing up. So I contacted Busboys and Poets about hosting an event for my book. Everything was good. Signed a contract after they researched my book. They locked into a contract with me, and they canceled the event for my book and cited my identity as the primary reason. Now, there's a lot going on with that, but yeah, that's the gist of how it started.
Second question I'm going to ask is, what evidence do you have about Busboys and Poets identifying as a black-owned business, and what are your thoughts on the social media comments about it?
Okay, so as far as the evidence goes, they had a listing on buyblack.org that got taken down as soon as the petition went up. They were listed on Yelp as a black-owned restaurant, and as the Baltimore Sun has stated, after getting in contact with Yelp stated that they had never clicked the yes to the black-owned thing. However, they're still listed as a black-owned business there. There are multiple articles that list them as a black-owned business. They participated in Black Restaurant Week in 2020, and they have their employees on video telling people that the place is black-owned. So there's a lot going on there. I put together a petition to get them to stop identifying as black-owned business. That petition went up to 1,200 signatures, and cumulatively, there's about 500,000 views on TikTok specifically. More than that across all social media platforms of me explaining the situation with Busboys and Poets. So.
The third question I'm going to ask is, Busboys and Poets host anti-racist events and host speakers of all ethnicities, and you're suing them for discrimination. And do you realize how that feels and sounds?
Yeah, I do. They host a lot of artists that are black. They host a lot of people who talk about like anti-racism. So yeah, the owner has expressed anti-black sentiment before. Now, however, here's the question, right? We're not saying that he doesn't allow black people in the store. We never claimed that he doesn't allow black people in the store. The question is about racial animus. So racial animus is essentially like, hey, black people like fried chicken, or white men can't jump. That's what we're talking about, right? So when we're saying that we're suing them for racial animus, the racial animus is that black men are against the LGBTQ community. But in every single statement that they've made since then has been alluding to the idea that my book is, well, racist and transphobic, right? The book's fundamentally not transphobic. If you go through the book and you take these things in context, the accusation that my work is transphobic doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Now, keep in mind, everything was set. I was going to have my book sold in their stores. I was going to have them promote my book. Big event. And it all changed as soon as I sent out my headshot. And now all of a sudden they're saying, well, it's because your work is transphobic. Well, it's because this, that, and the third. Well, what did my headshot have anything to do with it? Here's what I'm saying. In their email, their director of operations stated, quote, the primary reason why we're canceling your event is because the book is about a marginalized experience that the author does not identify with. Essentially stating in writing that the piece of information that changed was the fact that I sent out my headshot. Now that's the problem that we're talking about. That there was something about my identity that they believed would warrant the end of my event. That was in writing. There's no questions about that. They admitted that they discriminated.
So my follow-up question is, did they actually, so did the restaurant owner and did the people that were like saying something about your book, did they actually read the book or did they say it otherwise?
No, absolutely not. No, they didn't read the book. If they had read the book, they'd be like, yeah, your book's transphobic. Your characters spent half the time in the book fighting for trans rights. That's what they're doing in the book. And they're accusing it of being transphobic. They bring up reviews of my work saying that it's transphobic, right? That's not... You're going to find people who think that Get Out is anti-black. You're going to find people that think Brokeback Mountain is anti-gay. There's always going to be some dissenting opinion. And the question is whether or not that dissenting opinion reflects the reality. How about they bring up the reviews of my work where trans people reviewed my work and stated, yeah, this thing is not transphobic. And then they keep doubling down saying that the work is transphobic. And why do they keep doubling down on that? Because they need my work to be transphobic. Because if it's transphobic, all of a sudden, then they didn't discriminate. They framed it as if the fact that I sent out my cover alongside my headshot, and they're stating it was because I sent out the cover of my book. So here's the thing. In the email, they explicitly stated that they researched my book. They signed into a contract with me. My book was going to be sold in their stores. They were going to do a dedicated email blast to all their readers and listeners, or all their readers, listeners, social media followers. They're going to do a social media blast. Date locked in for the event. And their entire argument as to this not being discrimination is that throughout that entire process, they didn't even see the book cover. We can't discriminate. We're grossly negligent. We're saying we don't allow any hate speech. We're saying that we don't allow any transphobia, any racism, any of that in their stores. They said that they're a safe space. And you're going to tell me with a straight face that the approval process of having my book sold in their stores and renting out space didn't include them looking at the cover of my book? Like, come on. This is dumb. This is dumb. Like, let's just do the idiot test. Do you really, like, seriously, do you really believe that they would agree to host an event for my book, have my book sold in their stores, have a dedicated email blast, and they wouldn't even look at the cover?
So the fourth question I'm going to ask is the people putting out those internet comments about your book, what are your thoughts about those comments?
I took a lot of time to write my book with a lot of care. The book fundamentally does not satirize trans people. It satirizes people like allies. It's not satirizing trans people. Look, trans people are gone through enough. They don't need more people, making fun of them or anything like that. And that's been my perspective the entire time. It's upsetting. There's two types of reviews that I've gotten for my work. One saying that it's the most racist, transphobic thing that they've ever read. And then another selection of people are saying that it's explicitly that it's not transphobic, that it calls out transphobia, that it calls out racism. Like, I can deal with negative reviews of my work. Every single artist will deal with negative reviews of their work. The question is whether or not these people are going to be harassing my family. The question is whether or not they're going to be sending messages to my email account telling me to kill myself over my work. The question is whether or not I can peacefully speak about what's happening online without getting my personal information leaked and having people harass me like that. That's unacceptable. I've had great reviews on my work. I don't think that the accusation that my work is either racist or transphobic holds up to any level of scrutiny. If you were to say that my work is transphobic because that there is transphobia in it, you would need to say that a movie like Do the Right Thing is racist because there's racism in it. You would have to say that To Kill a Mockingbird is a racist book because there's racism in it. So if you want to say that my book is transphobic and racist because there's racism and transphobia in it, okay, But you need to apply that same logic to every other piece of literature. To Kill a Mockingbird is racist now. Brokeback Mountain is anti-gay because there's characters in it that do anti-gay things. Just because I have a character in my book that says or does a racist or transphobic thing does not mean that I, as an author, am racist or transphobic. I think we need to move past that.
So, I know this might have been a similar question, but the people that put out those internet reviews, how many of them actually read the book versus did not actually read the book?
Belief trumps evidence. And I think that a lot of people have prejudices that they're unwilling to admit that they have. So when they're shown evidence inside the book that does not confirm their initial biases, they throw that evidence out the window and say, that doesn't matter because I need to have my prejudice confirmed. None of them mention about how I wrote Lucy Anderson. They don't mention the fact that, like, hey, Lucy Anderson's entire story arc is singing in choir. And it's like, how does a trans person sing in choir? You go from a tenor to a countertenor. Are you going to be singing in falsetto in your future, or are you going to be singing full voice in your future? They point out things like, well, a character said a transphobic thing, or a character said the N-word. They completely ignore so much of the material that contradicts what they're saying. If you have a concern about my book, don't harass me. Just ask me a question. I will happily answer the question. I really don't know how they ended with the idea that the work is transphobic or racist. I don't think that the content aligns with that idea.
Based on what you have told me regarding what the owner said, how do you feel?
I mean, what? Do you want me to bring up the fact that he said that there's a name for a black person who does a bidding for the oppressor? What about the fact that the former First Lady of DC called the owner a racist? What about the fact that he said he was going to pander to the black community? He uses a facade of virtue to profit. Busboys and Poets is a virtuous place. It's clear in the advertising that they're trying to do that. It's clear in the advertising that they're trying to make people believe it is a black-owned business. I don't have many positive things to say about him aside from the fact that his story as an immigrant coming to this country and creating a successful business is admirable. One of the greatest things about immigrants in this country is that they oftentimes believe in the American dream more than natural-born Americans do. So that's where I'll give him his props. Like, I thought that was fantastic. The issue is that he built his entire successful brand off of the backs of black Americans and black culture. So I guess great job doing one of the most American things out there. Like, aside from that, I really don't have any positive things to say about the owner. I really don't.
The sixth question I'm going to ask is, what led you to look into Busboys and Poets being advertised as a black-owned business?
Yeah, okay. So when I was initially trying to find an attorney, I had issues getting an attorney because, I mean, they kept on telling me, it was like, it's a black-owned business. You're trying to sue for discrimination against a black-owned business. And I was like, no, it's not a black-owned business. They just do everything that they can to make it look like a black-owned business. I talked to journalists about this, and they were like, yeah, it's a black-owned business. You're not going to get, and like one of them explicitly stated they were just like, you can't get discriminated against by a black-owned business. And I was like, it's not a black-owned business. They do everything they can to make themselves look like a black-owned business, but that doesn't make you black. So that's really what made me start digging. And then when I started digging, I was like, oh my God, there are so many examples of them trying to portray themselves as a black-owned business. Question of what is whether or not this raises to the level of false advertising.
Why are you suing Busboys and Poets if they're hosting black artists, and why are you suing them for discrimination? And I understand this might have been a similar question I've asked, but just wanted to reiterate that.
Because I think it's pretty blatant. They stated in writing the primary reason that they canceled my event is because the book is about a marginalized experience that the author does not identify with. Their legal team is going through like a bunch of motions to try to discredit the discrimination thing. It's like, dude, your director of operations admitted in writing that you were discriminating. They didn't think it was acceptable that for a character to be pretending to transition to woman. They said it's because, trans people are constantly under fire, questioned, or even killed by our transphobic society. So they thought the idea of a person writing a book where they were dissecting the idea of someone who actually pretends to transition to a woman, they thought that was unacceptable. Now, my honest response to that is, well, what about the book Yellowface, right? The book Yellowface came out 2 months after mine. It's about a white woman who pretends to be Chinese in order to sell copies of her book. That book is sold in Busboys and Poets. So that was fine, even though there were random attacks on Asian Americans throughout the country while this was going on. But that concern about the violence that was going on towards Asian Americans wasn't enough for them to disallow Yellowface on their bookshelves. Keep in mind, they agreed to the contract. They broke the contract. Talk to any lawyer. They will look at it and be like, yeah, you guys broke contract. You can't just say, oh yeah, we're firing you. You came late to work a few times. Your work hasn't really been up to par, and you're black. What about that whole black thing right there? Nah, don't worry about that. I have reviews of my work saying that my work is transphobic. I also have reviews of my work explicitly contradicting that. So why is it that the ones that are negative get precedent over the ones that are positive? And that's the issue. And again, it all comes down to this. They're trying to find a way to excuse the discrimination that they did.
So the 11th question is in regards about the demand letter on you having to take down your video. Why do you think they sent you that letter?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. They paid an attorney probably $450 an hour plus to write up a demand letter and send it to me to get me to stop talking about the situation. Anyone who watches that video of me explaining the situation is going to realize it's like, yeah, this guy actually isn't really transphobic. They demanded that I not speak to anyone in the media. This guy is an activist. He claims that he fights for social justice. When I say, I'm like, yeah, this happened because of my race. And I'm like, yeah, this guy's a racist. When I say that in a video, he threatens to sue me over it, and he's an activist. This is ridiculous. What type of activist threatens to sue someone because a video came out about them and I was like, yeah, this happened because of my race. And he was like, no, it didn't. And if you say that it was about your race, we will sue you. That is insane. He thinks he has a problem with me. No, he has a problem with the First Amendment. That's not just me saying that. That's the former First Lady of DC. That's his former managers. His former managers came to me and was just like, yeah, this guy's racist. Out of his own mouth, he said, there is a name for a black person who does the bidding for the oppressor. That is incredibly racist. It is literally alluding to a racial slur, but he gets a pass because he's the activist. No, he said, you don't threaten to sue someone who's hooting and hollering and not making sense. The issue is, I made sense in that video. He didn't like it, so he threatened to sue me over it.
What are your thoughts and comments about the Baltimore Sun articles about your situation?